Today we're going to talk about leadership, storytelling and conflict resolution.
So welcome to ProfileTree TV, and today I'm joined by Tony Macauley from Macaulay Associates. So thank you very much for coming in and talking to us today.
Hi Kieran, it's good to be here.
Brilliant. So you would mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do in your company?
Well, I suppose there would really be three strands of what I do. The first is my company's called Macaulay Associates, and I've run that company for about 20 years now, and that is focused on social entrepreneurship and conflict resolution. And working with NGOs, voluntary community sector organisations, on their strategy, on the research, on their development, evaluation programs, things like that. So I've worked in that field really all my life. I grew up in Belfast in the 1970s, the height of the Troubles here, and really during that time that had a big impact on me, and ultimately I got involved in youth work and community development and peace building, and so I ended up really spending 25 years in that type of work, working all over Northern Ireland, and then eventually starting to work in other parts of the world in terms of post-conflict society. So I then started to work in places like Sri Lanka and El Salvador, and then ultimately I did quite a lot of work in the former Yugoslavia, in the Balkans, after the wars there in the 1990s, in terms of supporting youth workers in that part of the world in group work skills and conflict resolution. So that's sort of kind of been the main strand of my work for most of my life. But then about 10 years ago I went and did a creative writing class, and to my delight and surprise, I've ended up becoming a best-selling author, which is something I never planned to do and never expected to do. But I have to say it's been an amazing journey. Doing that. I suppose writing is my passion. I love writing. When I'm writing, the time passes, and I don't even know what time it is. So I've written a series of memoirs about my childhood, teenage years, and early adulthood, growing up in Belfast, and my early experiences of working across the peace lines in Northern Ireland in the 1980s, and that's been amazing in that you don't know when you write a book who's going to read it and where they're going to read it. And I never expected my books to be published internationally, or and I was delighted when they were in the main bookshop in Belfast. But then a few years later, they were in the main bookshop in Fifth Avenue in New York, and that was quite an experience, something I never really expected. So so writing's my passion. My first book, Paperboy, has actually last year was made into a musical. So it was adapted for the stage and made into a musical with music by Duke Special, this kind of platinum selling Belfast singer-songwriter. And it did really well, and it's coming back to the Lyric Theatre in Belfast again in 2019, and there's talk of a tour in the US and things like that. So that part of my that kind of unexpected part of my career just emerged 10 years ago when I went and did a wee creative writing class. And then the other strand of my work is which has developed again in the last 10 years, is the work that I now do in the private sector. So for most of my life I worked in the voluntary community sector, and in that whole area of community development, youth work and conflict resolution. And interestingly, one of my colleagues from years ago started a company in Belfast called Toward, and Toward is a company that works in all different sectors across the world in executive coaching, team coaching and leadership development. And I've worked as an associate with Toward for the past 10 years, and so and what we've done, many of us who work with Toward have come from a similar background to me, and we take our experience at that side, kind of grassroots community development, conflict resolution. We bring that to senior executives, and we work with senior executive teams at Excos. And when you've done community-based conflict resolution, you're not really intimidated by anyone in the boardroom, because you've facilitated very tough dialogue with people who were literally killing one another. So to be in, to bring that experience into the private sector and to work with senior executives in global companies has been something again that I never expected to do, but something that I have to say I'm really enjoying. I love doing that. I love working with senior teams. I love working with brilliant people who are very committed to what they are doing and are brilliant in their own field. Um, but often people like that, like all of us, need a bit of support, a bit of confidential coaching, a bit of support in the background, maybe sometimes about where they're going next in their career or in their life, or maybe just maybe issues that they struggle with a bit, sometimes dealing with difficult people, or maybe making a tough decision. So part of a lot of the coaching that I do with senior leaders are on those sort of issues.
Incredible, excellent. So, what a breadth of experience. So we've a lot to talk about. so have you seen in the NGO sector a big change in your 20 years that you've worked in that sector? And is there a difference between what happened here in Northern Ireland, what you did here in Northern Ireland, and other countries, or are we all human and we deal with things the same way?
Well, in terms of the NGO sector has become more professional in my time working in it. I remember when I started doing an MBA maybe 15 years ago, and there was no sort of specific voluntary sector unit or module you could do, but now there are a number of those that you can do, and so the voluntary sector has become more professional over that period of time. It continues to be a struggle. Resources, when the economy's tight, and there are cuts and challenges in the economy, that has an impact on the NGO sector. So that's a constant challenge. But there's also been a lot of innovation as well in the voluntary sector, particularly around social entrepreneurship. So it's not simply just about asking for donations and doing fundraising. It's about maybe running a social business, where you reinvest the profits back into the services of the charity. So I've seen that development over the years. It's interesting for me now that at this stage in my life, my career, I'm interested in making a contribution, giving back, and so I do, as a volunteer, coach some leaders in East Africa. So I'm currently coaching a young leader who runs a social entrepreneur project in one of the biggest slums in Kampala. So I coach him via Skype, regularly, and I'm supporting that project where it's basically local young people supporting other local young people in that community, and so I've been involved there now for the past year just, and I'll be going back to Kampala later this year. And this is where I love to bring things together. So I'm coaching the leaders of the project. I'm kind of I actually got them to do my website because they're web designers. But I'm also going to record an audiobook of my second book, Breadboy, in next year. And I was looking around, where I would record the audiobook, and I recorded the first audiobook, Paperboy in Belfast, and I decided I would record it in Kampala with this group of young people, because that's one of the things they do. They have a little studio and they do that. So I love when I can combine things like that. So that's the one project. The other project that I'm involved in East Africa is in Rwanda, and this is something that's really close to my heart. So I really believe that reconciliation is a very important part of any country or community that's been through a period of conflict, like Northern Ireland, where I've grown up, and Rwanda has a remarkable story to tell. So in 1994 there was the genocide. It was 1 million people were killed in 100 days. It was one of the worst genocides the world has ever seen. And I was there a few months ago, and I got to see the worst of what humanity can do, but I also got to see the best. And the project I'm involved with in Rwanda is to establish basically an international reconciliation centre which shares the stories of reconciliation and forgiveness in Rwanda with the rest of the world. Because what has happened there is remarkable. So you have various initiatives where perpetrators and survivors of the genocide have actually been reconciled to one another. And this is people who have um, how formerly were neighbours and friends. During the genocide, maybe the perpetrator killed a woman's husband, and now the widow and the perpetrator, they've got to some stage of reconciliation. He has asked for forgiveness. She has forgiven him, and they're now actually working together. And so, a few months ago, I was in some of the villages in the beautiful hills of Rwanda, and I sat in a group of about 40 people, and various pairs got up and shared their stories of how they had done terrible, someone had done something terrible to this person. This person, they'd gone to prison for many years. When they'd been released, they were out living in the local community. They saw them every day, and they went through these forgiveness and reconciliation workshops, and eventually they met and they had a dialogue with each other, and they found peace with each other in spite of the horrific things that one of them had done and one of them had suffered. So I think that's remarkable. To me, it's one of the most amazing things I've ever heard, and I'm interested in stories. As a writer, I believe in stories and the power of stories. I want the stories that I heard in the villages of Rwanda to be heard by more people around the world. And part of this, the vision of this reconciliation centre in Rwanda is that it would record those stories, and that it be a repository for those stories. And in years to come, when there are other conflicts in the world, that people will be able to look and say, well, what did they do in Rwanda after such a horrific time? And I think it's also a challenge for me in my country, where in Northern Ireland, because we've had peace for many years, and we're in, Northern Ireland's transformed from when I was growing up, but we haven't had the reconciliation in the same deep way that I've seen people reconciling in Rwanda. So I'm really interested in sharing the stories of Rwanda in my country as well.
Incredible. And actually, I remember growing up and seeing the problems and what was happening in Rwanda on TV and reading about it. Again, as you say, the horrendous things that happen out there. And you mentioned Yugoslavia as well. It's very strange, living here in Northern Ireland and actually seeing some of the troubles myself, and then seeing it other countries going through their own problems and our perception of that. But actually, again, I guess we all share the same problems. There's a conflict, and we need to go through resolution and come out the other end, or else we'll never be right.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I always feel when I'm in another country, it's really important to be careful not to impose, my solution or what worked in my country in their country, and I think that's important. However, human beings, what I've discovered is human beings are the same everywhere. Like we have the same emotions, we feel the same way, and that's what I discover, both when people are, at each other's throats, and then when people are getting through conflict and trying to come to terms with it and wanting to reconcile. Human behaviour, human beings are the same the world over. And at the start of that meeting in Rwanda, in that village, the guy who was organising the meeting stood up and he said, "Do you know what drives this? He said, it's just love." And I thought, well, one of the most basic human emotions is love, and they're in that context, after all the horrific things that had happened there, that was what was driving them to try to create a better future in their village.
Incredible, yeah. So I know you have a lot of stories, so we look forward to you documenting them and publishing them in the future years.
Yeah, well, I one of the interesting things, when I was in Rwanda, I met a young screenwriter, and I'm now keeping in touch with him, and we're collaborating on writing a story, and I'll write a novel version, and he's going to write the screen version of a really powerful story of reconciliation from Rwanda. So I've been inspired, by my visit there to write more about those stories.
Incredible. And you've actually then taken your skills that you've developed in your 20 years in the NGO sector into businesses and helping business leaders. Then have you found that's been an easy transition? Is it the people work, as you say, people are people, and we seem to find conflict no matter what happens?
Yeah, so there really isn't much difference between, facilitating, some conflict resolution, some difficult conversations in a kind of community context than in a corporate context, because again, the behaviors are the same, and how people react when there's tension and difference and conflict is the same, whether it's a family conflict, a community conflict, or a conflict within an organization. The behaviors are the same, and the kind of approaches and techniques for conflict resolution, can be applied in all of those contexts. And I suppose I found the transition into that world easier than I expected. I had assumed it was more about me. I had assumed that perhaps there wouldn't, but because the NGO sector has fewer resources, and in some way that, that it wouldn't be regarded as serious or credible in some way. But what I find is the opposite. I find that very often, in some of the work that I do with Toward, very often we are chosen to do that work because we have that sort of background and that kind of life experience, rather than maybe a more traditional kind of consultancy type company. So so what's been fascinating is people are really interested in that experience and those stories and that work, and they find they can relate to it, and it can be relevant to what's going on for them in their leadership and in the business. We do a lot of work around supporting companies who are involved in a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and they've maybe bought a huge company which has a different culture from the acquiring company, and they're very interested in the process of how do you support the people in the acquired company to adopt and own the culture of the main company now. And so we would do a lot of work around personal values and how my values relate to the culture of the organisation. What is the culture, and do I feel aligned or misaligned with the culture of the organisation? And a lot of that work, it comes from that same sort of root of the work that I've done in the past around conflict resolution and community development, where they're very kind of values-led types of initiatives.
Amazing. I'm thinking that it's a very interesting time, exciting time for any business, mergers, but also it's probably a dangerous time if the cultures don't fit and there is conflict, because that's probably where I can see the bit of a clash. Things.
Yes.
Even here, I know we merged our councils. I'm sure even I can just imagine this council, and it's a big undertaking to try and merge two bodies that have two different operations and do it in a way that the outcome is as productive as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think really, really, smart companies get that the culture is really important, and the culture can make or break whether a merger or an acquisition is successful or not. So I think when companies understand that and invest in that, I think it makes a big difference to whether a merger and acquisition is going to be successful. So I think that's really, really important.
Incredible. So a lot of prevention and trying to foresee problems and negate them, I guess, as opposed to actually having to deal with problems that have happened? Or do you find that there is conflicts in companies and you need to step in and actually help people resolve problems as well?
It's a real mixture. Very often we work with senior teams and they're really good, but they want to be even better. They want to move from good to great. They're ambitious. They want to get to the next level. Other times we work with teams that are very new and they're not really functioning as a team. There aren't really any problems or tensions. They haven't really gelled, or maybe there's been a restructure and they're kind of new to each other. And sometimes we do work with teams where there's a bit of history, and there are issues that need to be addressed and need to, we provide a space where the elephant can come into the room and people can have a bit of difficult conversation with each other and try to work things out as well.
Amazing. Actually, a previous company I've been through something like that, and it was a senior team. It was a process of improvement, and exactly as you say, there was a lot of. It was actually very emotional. I recall because there was a lot of things discussed, but the atmosphere and the team after that was incredible. What happened, the transformation in our output and our relationship with each of our colleagues, it was transformational. Yeah. So I can understand how that is so important. So in Toward, then you actually do this work through towards? And do you use different types of processes or models, or what's the, is it different systems or processes for different cases of business?
Yeah, well, it would be very bespoke, you know. So we wouldn't Toward wouldn't offer, you know, just a set program. It's always We always do diagnostic work, and we would do interviews, and we would, you know, talk to leaders to see what they need in terms of team development or leadership development, and then we would design something specifically for them. In terms of the executive coaching, you know, the one-to-one coaching, we'd draw on different coaching models. We wouldn't use just one. We just draw on different models and whatever most relevant, you know, for that particular person. Um, but over the years, we actually have developed a team coaching model in Toward, which you know, which we think is, you know, effective. And we talk about, you know, four key elements of team coaching for a senior leadership team. The first is breathing space. So just, you know, very often they're so busy, they're going at 100 miles an hour. There's constant change, there's so much going on. Just to take the time to, you know, to come together. Maybe they're based in different parts of the world or different parts of the country. Just to take the time to come together just for 2 days and have some space to breathe and sort of get out of the weeds and have a bit of, you know, big picture thinking. And so that sort of breathing space is the first. The second is what we call relational flow, because the relationships can make or break a team. You know, if there's tensions and competition, unhealthy competition going on, if there's undermining behaviour going on of a team, if there are things that need to be said that aren't being said, that's a huge waste of energy that reduces a team's effectiveness. So relational flow is really important. Again, sometimes it's, you know, in team coaching, it's simply just people getting to know each other or getting to know how they tick. You know, we do use some psychometrics at times to sort of underpin that, you know, just to help people understand the different personalities, different styles, all of that. But that's the relational flow. The third part is what we would call purposeful clarity. So every team needs to be clear what their purpose is. And so one of the first things we ask when we talk to team members on a senior leadership team is, are you clear on your purpose, or to what extent are you clear on your purpose of the team? And if they're not clear, we need to work with them on getting that clarity. And then the fourth area is commitment, because we can have fantastic team coaching sessions, but if people aren't committed to put into practice what they've agreed, when they go back into the busyness of the day-to-day work, then it will have been a waste of time. So we would put a lot of emphasis on the commitments that senior leaders make to one another, or team members make to one another, following an intervention from us to ensure that they follow through on the commitments that they've made.
Incredible. And do you see it as important, or makes a big change in businesses that you've worked in?
Yeah, it's incredible. You know, so some companies that we've worked with, for example, you know, we perhaps have worked with a particular team in a part of a big financial institution, and they've been able to say that as a result of that kind of, you know, that kind of team coaching over a period of 3 years, it's one of the factors that has led to considerable growth. You know, and increase in profit. Now, it's not the only factor, but they have identified it as one of the significant factors. In other cases, we have worked with organisations going through massive change, a lot of change and ambiguity and uncertainty, and certainly what's been interesting with some of those companies that they've worked with, in spite of the change and ambiguity, that actually their business as usual has been doing very well. Their commercials are excellent in spite of all the challenges that are going on. So I think the fact that they have invested in that kind of, the people element has worked for them financially.
Amazing. And is there signs that company owners or leaders should be watching out for, that they need to identify, that maybe signals that they need to change, that they need to look at their how their teams are performing and integrating?
Yeah, so one of the things that Toward has developed is a crisis incubation tool, which is it's called Canary. You know, like a canary in a coal mine.
Yeah.
You know, where the old canary in the coal mine was to see if there was poison in the air. It's a bit like that, and it's about organisation resilience. And so there are a series of measures in the Canary psychometric, which are kind of things to look out for. So for example, and it's based on research that we did into crises and disasters, and in some cases literal disasters, like an oil spillage or plane crashes, things like that. And we looked for what were the factors in terms of leadership that in all the reports and all the inquiries of disasters and crises in different sectors, what were the behaviours of leaders that contributed to the crisis. And we found quite similar things. So one example would be, for example, one of the factors we look at is called flexibility with hierarchy. And so organisations are leaders who are not flexible around hierarchy. In other words, they dare not be questioned because they're the boss. That can incubate crisis. The most extreme example of that is the co-pilot who dares not question the pilot as they're about to crash. That's the most extreme example of that. But there are other examples of that where perhaps there's a kind of a very autocratic, charismatic CEO in an organisation, and people know things are not right, but they weren't prepared to call them out. They weren't prepared to kind of go beyond the hierarchy, and so that's one of the factors in the Canary psychometric that we look at as a sort of an indicator that there may be a crisis brewing. And of course, prevention, as you were saying, prevention is better than cure. So a lot of that is about building resilience so that they never get to the crisis point.
Amazing. So sounds very interesting. I definitely will need to check out and find out more on this. So skipping then or segueing into your writing. So you've decided to write books. You've a passion for writing. So we do a lot of writing in here for, I guess, for content marketing. So shared passion, but I would definitely not claim to be an author now. But could you tell us a little bit about your books and your stories? And is it based in Northern Ireland, the conflict zone, or tell us a little bit about?
Yes. So about 10 years ago, I went to a creative writing class just for fun. It was after I'd done my MBA. I did it with the Open University, and I really enjoyed that as a way of learning, the distance learning. But after about a year, I missed it a little bit, and I couldn't think of any particular course that I needed to do professionally at that stage. And I thought, well, why don't I just have a look at the Open University prospectus, and just do something for fun. And I noticed some creative writing courses. And about the same time, my mother was moving house and she found my old school reports. And there were all these nice comments in my school reports from my English teachers about my writing. So I thought, I haven't written creatively for years now. Maybe a bit like you, I'd written many business reports. I'd done a lot of business writing, and I even enjoy that, as well. But I hadn't written creatively for many years. And I thought, well, I'll go and do a creative writing course just for the fun of it and, see what happens. And really one of the assignments that I had to do on the course formed a part of the chapter in my first book, Paperboy, and then to my great surprise, it was published, and then so the Paperboy is about being a 12-year-old paperboy delivering the Belfast Telegraph in West Belfast in the 1970s, basically, and not far from here actually. And so the second book is called Breadboy, and in Breadboy, my customer service delivery skills were so renowned that I was headhunted by the local bread delivery man, and I got a new Saturday job working as a teenager and delivering bread in West Belfast in the 1970s. The third book is called All Growed Up, and this one I go to university for the first time, have all my ideas about the world challenged, meet people from different places, fall in love. All of that happens in All Growed Up. And then the fourth memoir is called Little House on the Peace Line, and it tells the story of how I left university, got married, and went to live on the Peace Line in North Belfast, right beside one of the peace walls in the 1980s. And my wife and I worked across the peace line, and we lived right on the peace line right at the height of the Troubles in North Belfast in the 1980s, in our little house on the Peace Line. So that's so it's really a series of memoirs. They're not misery memoirs. Although you might be surprised, but they're not misery memoirs, even though they're set at a difficult time. There's a lot of humour, a lot of Belfast humour in them, and I had a very happy childhood. In spite of all that was going on around me. So that's kind of the tone of them, and what I love about the musical version of Paperboy is they've really captured that. They've captured the music and the style and the sense of just growing up and being a kid, in spite of all the terrible things that were happening in the background.
Incredible. And so, for anyone that's interested or lived in Belfast or Northern Ireland or interested in Irish history, I guess then it'd be loads of stories and anecdotes to dip in and out of.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's what I find interesting in other countries is people are interested in the social history. So they've maybe seen the TV reports and they've a sense of what the Troubles was about and a bit of sense of Irish history from school or something. But the social history they're interested in, how did ordinary people get on? And my story is just about being an ordinary kid. I wasn't a politician or a paramilitary or a policeman or anything like that. I was just a kid. I was a paper boy. I was just an ordinary kid, and people are interested in that social history. So next week I'm actually going to Norway, where they're studying Paperboy in English classes in secondary schools there. So what I find amazing is that there's teenagers in Norway who are interested in the social history of Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and they're actually reading my book. It's quite amazing.
No, it's incredible, but it's also great that it's actually captured because these stories, the history, and 50 years, 100 years, we want people to remember and see and understand what it was like.
Yeah, and that's important to me because, as I say, mine is the story, I think, of probably most people in Northern Ireland, who are not famous or weren't part of the peace process and all of that. Just the ordinary people, or just ordinary families trying to get on with their lives as best they could in spite of it being a difficult period of time. So I like the idea that the kind of story of ordinary people's out there alongside the kind of the official histories that get written as well.
And actually, yeah, and as you say, sometimes the official histories can be a little bit too heavy to read.
Yeah.
And actually, something like this, I can imagine a lot of enjoyment and real life, what it was like for real. Because I even remember growing up, and I've 2 or 3 memories that I'll tell my kids and grandkids all about. But no, I'm looking forward to reading these books. Looking forward to that. So the process of writing, did you find it hard? So obviously you've written before, but actually then going to a book and getting it published, was the process hard? Was there many? We all hear. Is there many knockbacks? Was it a success overnight?
I was very fortunate. So I sent Paperboy to 2 publishers, expecting them both to say no. One of them said no, and one of them said yes. And I was all ready for 50 rejections. So I was
filled up, ready to go. Yeah.
I was quite taken aback, and I honestly at that stage I didn't know, was it good enough. I didn't feel that confident as a writer at that stage, and I wasn't sure. And if I'd got 50 rejections, I probably would have thought, well, maybe it's not good enough. So I was really surprised and excited when this publisher came back to me almost right away and said, we like this. We've sent it to they'd sent it to a literature critic of one of the Irish newspapers, and he'd liked it too, and they'd asked me, was it finished yet? Was there any more? I hadn't finished writing it at that stage. So I was very fortunate in that sense. The other part that I didn't expect about being a writer was all that goes with it. So, like festivals and book readings and events, and I know a lot of writers don't enjoy that because they're quite solitary, introverted people. But I actually enjoy all that. So I like doing all those sort of things. I think I've been to every Irish festival in the United States at this stage. Doing book readings and signings and things like that. And because my books, there's a humour in my books. What I find is I really enjoy kind of almost performing it and having an audience that's enjoying and laughing. Because usually with my other work, when I'm standing in front of a group of people, it's quite serious at times. So it's lovely to do something which is just, great fun and entertaining as well.
Incredible. And your process of writing then, again, if there's anyone watching and thinking, okay, even maybe not writing a book, but trying to write some content for their business or website, do you have a process that works, or what's your secret?
I think just do it. There's so many things to distract you from writing. It might mean switching off the Wi-Fi on your computer. It might mean going to a different location. I can't write in my office. I have to. I go actually to coffee shops and public places. I actually write on airplanes at 30,000 feet, and so that to me the place is important. And if I associate it with a different type of writing, I find it really difficult. So I think the place is important. The time is important. Just to take the time, even if it's only half an hour a day, it makes a difference. I've had different rhythms. I used to write one day a week, but then I got so busy that I couldn't do that anymore. And at the minute, I'm writing on retreats. So I've actually booked retreats away for whole weeks this year, where I can't do anything else because I've already booked the flights, and I just go away and I write, and I've been to writing retreats. So I've done that. I've done that as well. I find I've never had writer's block, but I do find the early part of a process of writing, when you're just thinking it and structuring it, I find that can be hard work, and I think if anyone experiences that with writing, I would just say, go with it. That's part of it. You're just doing the work, and I would sometimes write for a while and then just go for a walk and let it all sink in, and then when I return to it, maybe later or the next day or the next week, I notice what's good about it, and I notice what needs changed about it. Yeah, but I think part of that struggle and part of that distraction is actually part of the process of your working out what you're going to say. So I would do short scripts of thought for the day for the BBC. So they're 2.5 minute scripts. They have to be quite topical and current. I was doing one this morning actually, and sometimes it's 2 days before thought for the day, and I haven't had a thought, and I need some stimulation, and it's almost as if the process leading up to that, where I've been thinking about it for a day, I'm trying to work out what is it I'm going to talk about, what am I going to write about. That's almost more difficult than when I actually start doing the writing. So I think the struggle in writing is the work, and rather than not enjoy that, I just think that's just part of it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Perfect sense, yes.
Yeah.
And as you say, the key part then is just get to it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Just do it. Sometimes, I meet people and they say to me, I'd love to write, but I don't have time, or I'm not sure what to write. And I think, I say to them, well, just go home tonight and just write the first thing comes into your head for an hour. Just write. Don't worry about the grammar or the spelling. Don't worry about if it's ever going to be published. Or just see what comes out. And I think it's really important for every writer to find their own voice. Not to try to be somebody else. Well, that's one of the things that I learned doing the creative writing courses. Rather than trying to copy someone and sound a bit pretentious, I realised actually to be a good writer is finding your own voice. And no one else has your voice. We all have a distinct voice, a unique voice, because we're all unique with all our own experiences. So I encourage people when they're writing to find their own voice, and not try to copy anyone else's. Certainly don't try to copy my voice.
Stop it. But no, and it's the uniqueness and the realness that makes something interesting.
Oh, to me that's the core of powerful writing. Someone's unique, powerful voice.
Incredible. So what's next? What does the future hold then for yourself? What's on the plans?
Well, it's interesting. I'm sort of transitioning from non-fiction, memoir, into fiction. I'm just completing my first novel at the minute, and I'm also collaborating, as I said, on another novel and screenplay, based on a story in Rwanda that I was talking about. So also this year the musical returns, and I'll be around for the rehearsals and all of that. as kind of an advisor in the background. It's the most remarkable thing to see your life on the stage. You know, it is an amazing experience. And then I have a busy year coming up just with travel, where you know some of the companies we're working with are global, and so I'm going to be traveling really all over the world in the next few months. With one piece of work we're involved in with Toward is a culture program with a big acquisition with a huge company. So I'm going to be rolling out a leadership development culture program in North America, Latin America, Asia, and Europe over the next few months.
Incredible. So loads of writing time on airplanes.
Exactly. I'll squeeze it in at 35,000 feet.
Brilliant. Another merge of the two disciplines. So brilliant. So if anyone wants to reach out or connect, find out more about yourself, or even find the books, where's the best places that people should go and search?
Well, so my website's tonymacauley.co.uk. That can guide you either to MacaulayAssociates.co.uk, which is about my work, my leadership work, my coaching, all of that work, or it can guide you to TonyMacaulayAuthor.com, which is my website, which is more about my writing and my books.
Brilliant.
I'm also on all the social media, you know, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of those as well.
Excellent, and we'll have all the links underneath this video and in this article, so anyone can check and click. So again, no, thank you very much for coming in today and telling us a little bit about what you're doing. Incredible. So I've got a little bit of reading now for the weekend, I think, the weekends ahead. So thank you very much for coming in and sharing your time with us today.
You're welcome, Kieran. It's good to meet you.
Excellent. Excellent. And thank you for watching the video today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and do check out the links below and start reading and learn a little bit about what Belfast was like in the 70s and 80s, and you'll be amazed at the stories we have here. So this is Kieran from ProfileTree, a content agency in Belfast. We're based in the Springfield Road and Innovation Factory, and hopefully you'll watch our next video tomorrow. So thank you again.